Namaskar, everybody, and a hearty welcome to this morning's meeting. Thank you all for coming and taking part here, and thanks to the Matajis for the nice song they presented. As you already know, the theme of today's talk is the challenge of spiritual life. So, let me begin right away. Spiritual life is often compared to an adventure. It is likened to a daring feat, a bold undertaking. It has its difficulties and dangers, and it also has its joys and rewards. It is like a journey up rugged, snow-clad mountains. It is beautiful, but to enjoy that journey, it also takes much training. In mountain climbing, there are many obstacles, many hindrances, which prevent an ill-equipped climber from reaching the summit. Then there are pleasant diversions. As one climbs up, one may be charmed by the beauty of the pleasant landscape below and stop moving. Or one may be captivated by the sight of the pristine peaks above and forget to climb on. It is much the same in spiritual life. In today's talk, I'll be focusing more on the importance of training and equipment. In other words, qualities required of an aspirant who would take up the challenge of spiritual life than on the adventure of spiritual life itself. We will begin with defining the words adventure and spirituality, and then discuss in some detail the main qualifications we need to possess before setting out on our spiritual adventure. Just as there was a phenomenal popular interest in yoga and meditation way back in the 1960s and 70s, we in present times are witnessing a great popular interest in spirituality, both traditional spirituality and alternative spirituality. You pick up any mainstream newspaper or magazine, and it is very likely that you'll find a column devoted to spiritual life, spiritual living. Watch any good television channel long enough, and you are sure to come across a program dealing with spirituality. Now, the immensity of this interest in spiritual living is heartening, of course. But on the other hand, it is also quite disheartening to see what passes for spirituality is not what spirituality really is. Even travel agencies have spiritual adventures to offer, as if spirituality were a sort of extreme sport. A luxurious cruise in the Caribbean Sea with yoga and meditation courses on the menu may be made more attractive with a bit of something called spiritual healing, or a trip through some old Buddhist ruins in the exotic Far East, spiced up with fine Asian cuisine, or a royal class rail journey somewhere in India with exclusive spiritual discourses, with some song and dance to go with it. Whatever, it's obvious that these things are not even adventurous. Forget spirituality. All they have to offer is some novelty, some excitement and thrill, all of which ends with a weekend. leaving the so-called adventurer spent, their energies dissipated. So then, what is an adventure? An adventure, by definition, an adventure is a serious undertaking of a hazardous nature. It is fraught with danger and risk. It is full of obstacles and adversities, and it is marked by frequent periods of uncertainty. But when successfully undertaken, an adventure worth the name rewards the adventurer with a sense of achievement and lasting fulfillment. That is what a real adventure is. And what is spirituality? According to Vedanta, spirituality is self-realization, knowing that there is no difference between God and one's own divine self. Discovering that one's true self is identical with the universal spirit. The seeker must reach very high. They must go very deep in order to achieve this supreme goal. That is what spirituality is. Now, when we take these two definitions together, we get a fair idea of how adventurous real spiritual life is. That is the reason why the Upanishad says this self is not to be attained by the weak. But together with its insistence on strength, the Upanishad also implies the necessity of proper training when it says the path to the supreme is as difficult to tread as the sharp edge of a razor. Adventures are daunting. They can be dangerous only when we are not sufficiently equipped or well trained. But when these two prerequisites are fulfilled, we can be sure that our spiritual adventure, even if not entirely successful, will nevertheless be worthwhile and rewarding. Now, the first prerequisite is strength. Strength is a quality that makes us self-confident, independent, fearless, and capable of meeting tough situations. All miseries can be overcome, but we have to be strong and manly. By the term manly, I only mean a certain quality that is traditionally associated with men, which is expected more in a man. That's all. So, strength. There is really no alternative to that quality. There is no substitute for strength. Every worthwhile endeavor must begin with the assumption that we are strong enough for it. Otherwise, we can't even put our first step forward. Weakness never does anything for us except make us weaker still. So things are accomplished by the energy and strength that is put into them. All great achievements, outer or inner, are the fruits of strength. But where are we to find this strength? As they say, where our heart is, there our strength is. This is a psychological fact. We go, or we can't help going where our heart takes us. If we desire something strongly enough, with all our heart and soul, the object of our desire becomes ours sooner or later. It is only a matter of time. So let us be strong. Let us be self-reliant. Let us never forget that in the long run, it is the stout heart It is the strong heart, not the sharp intelligence, that will take us nearer to God. Complete success may not always be granted to us despite our strength, but we must not be discouraged by defeat, because then that would be the real defeat. So, as true Vedantins, let us always remember that we have infinite strength within ourselves. With strength, we must approach the God who is the source of all strength. In fact, there is a Vedic prayer which says, Balamasi balammayi dehi. You are strength, give me strength. So strength, more importantly, mental strength, is a vital requirement. Spiritual life is not for weak minds. Why? Because weak minds can't accept a high ideal, and they can't pay the high price it demands. They are frightened by the struggles and sacrifices that spiritual life involves. One of the tests of mental strength is faith and perseverance. Only a strong mind can have a firm faith. One must believe firmly, I can achieve something in the world of spirit. Success in spiritual life depends on our firmly and steadily holding on to the spiritual ideal. In the midst of all the confusion and darkness on the relative plane, we must stick to a definite course of action. Thinking, feeling, willing, everything has to be unified. Otherwise, spiritual life doesn't produce the expected result. It often happens that many spiritual aspirants set out with great enthusiasm, but soon their fervor evaporates when they meet with various kinds of obstacles. Swami Vivekananda always insisted on great tenacity of purpose in the life of his followers. Just look at the lives of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, or for that matter, the lives of anyone who has achieved some greatness in life. What tremendous strength of mind, what gigantic wills they possessed. We need a little of their grit and determination in order to achieve something in spiritual life. Even if we fail, let us never own defeat. Let us never stop struggling. We may fall, but we have to rise again. Spiritual life is rarely smooth. It rarely goes in a straight line, but we shouldn't make that an excuse for falling too frequently. If we persist in our struggles, and if we learn to rise after every fall, we will come to possess great strength of mind. That is what is called grit. Another sign of mental strength is fearlessness. Sometimes, much of our energy is lost through unfounded fears. Of course, we shouldn't be too bold and think we are very secure, but the person who is always afraid of falling down is sure to fall. Just as the person who is overconfident is sure to slip someday. As we go higher and higher, there is always the danger of our slipping and falling, but that is no reason for our being continually haunted by the fear of falling. Then there is another kind of fear of public opinion. Oh, what will others think of me? Let others think whatever they like. If I am fully convinced that the path I've chosen is right, it doesn't matter much what others think or say about me. The question is, Should I yield to others' opinions on principles that affect my whole life? Should I lose the treasures of spiritual life? Should I forgo the rewards of spiritual life for fear of ignorant people? In the Gospel, we find Sri Ramakrishna advising the young Naren how he should regard the criticism of petty-minded people. He says, with as much indifference as an elephant has for the barking of dogs. Then, yet another test of mental strength is the ability to take firm decisions. Indecision is always a sign of mental weakness. If we remain in a state of indecision for a long time, instead of gaining strength, we become weaker. If we are decisive in small things, then we find it easier to be decisive about bigger things also. Even small things have to be done consciously, intelligently, but also decisively. Before we actually begin our spiritual life in real earnest, we must decide if we are really and fully prepared to pay the price for it. Generally, there are two tendencies in us: the worldly tendency and the spiritual tendency. If both are more or less equally strong in the beginning, then the spiritual tendency has to be strengthened. Otherwise, there will be no progress. And the conflict within, the tug of war that going on within ourselves can never be overcome. That is why it is very necessary for us to fix one for all our ideal and then stick to it whatever happens. If we really wish to follow this difficult path, which is beset by with so many pitfalls and dangers, we must also be prepared to overcome all the difficulties. If we wish to transcend all illusions, there has to be a certain amount of fearlessness and heroism in us. Real spiritual life is not easy. Dangers and pitfalls lurk everywhere, on all sides. And if once caught, there is usually very little chance of recovery. Then, after strength comes training. Training ourselves to walk on the razor's edge, as the Upanishad said. Everything has a method, and there is a method in spiritual life too. Many people are afraid of following the spiritual path because they think it is too demanding. Of course, that is true, but with proper training, even the most difficult path can be followed. And if we do that, in the end, the rewards are ours to enjoy. This is what the ancient Hindu rishis discovered. The core component of spiritual training is self-control, control of the body, restraint of the senses, withdrawal of the mind. And this exercise of self-control gradually leads to self-mastery, which is a reward, a very high reward in itself. Regular spiritual practice has this effect of integrating our whole personality, so making us masters of ourselves. It brings about a mental poise that enables us to live in this world with control and grace, and at the same time make spiritual progress. It brings to mind something Sri Ramakrishna said. Sri Ramakrishna saw when he went to a circus in Calcutta. There were many feats on exhibition at the circus, and one of these impressed the master greatly. A horse ran around a circular track over which large metal hoops were hung at intervals. The circus rider, an English woman, stood on one foot on the horse's back, and as the horse passed under the hoops, she leaped through them, always alighting on one foot on the horse's back. The horse raced around the circle many times, but the woman never missed the horse or lost her balance. After returning from the circus, Sri Ramakrishna reminded his disciples of what one should do in one's spiritual life. He observed, "What a difficult feat that must be. She must have practiced a long time. The slightest carelessness, and she would break her limbs. She might even be killed. One faces the same difficulty leading a spiritual life in the world. Only a few succeed in it through God's grace and as a result of their spiritual practice. Therefore, spiritual practice is extremely necessary." I'd like to draw attention to Sri Ramakrishna's words here. He says, only a few succeed in it through God's grace and as a result of their spiritual practice. Therefore, spiritual practice is extremely necessary. Mark you, Sri Ramakrishna's emphasis here is clearly on training, not on grace. Anyhow, now I'd like to enumerate a few other important qualities we aspirants must possess if we want to advance in spiritual life. I mentioned faith. This faith comes before everything else. We have to have faith in the spiritual ideal. But in the beginning stages, our faith has also to be constantly verified. Why I say this is, if belief is not based on reality, it will soon vanish. The goal of life is freedom from bondage and the attainment of supreme peace. Jivan Mukti, Paramasukha Prapti. And the means of attaining this is self-knowledge. This is what sages and saints have been proclaiming down the ages. So this ideal of self-realization must be fixed and clear before we begin serious spiritual practice. We must have clear, definite ideas of both the path and the goal. As long as we allow ourselves to be vague and dreamy, there will be a continual conflict within which will prevent us from advancing. In addition to faith in the ideal, we must also have faith in our ability to realize it. Doubt is a very great danger and can obstruct all progress in spiritual life. It means lack of faith not only in the ideal but also in oneself. So we must never allow ourselves to be weakened by it. Instead, we must always think of ourselves in the best terms and, more important, try to live up to them. It's not enough to think very highly about ourselves. We have to live according to our ideas of ourselves. As Swami Vivekananda said, if we have faith in all the millions of our gods and still have no faith in ourselves, there is no salvation for us. On the other hand, a strong self-belief releases our blocked energies in the right direction and becomes a motive force that drives us forward. So, this highly affirmative quality called faith, when this faith is not just a mere passive belief, but a burning conviction within, then it is always followed by the next requirement, which is effort, purposeful action. So, the next requirement is whole soul effort aimed at actualization of the goal. As we heard just now, where our heart is, there our strength is. So, action, purposeful action, is the test of faith. Those who have faith will always act. They don't waste too much time waiting for help because they can't. They are so eager that they start on the basis of their own effort and sincerely go about spiritual practice as best as they can. At the same time, they also make use of everything that helps, books, teachers, anything. But the trouble with others is that they catch hold of the lowest rung of the ladder, and there they stand waiting for God's grace. This is nothing but self-deception, and it is a symptom of lack of faith. Lack of enthusiasm is a clear indication of lack of faith. One attains success only if one makes an effort. Success comes only with sustained eagerness. As a matter of fact, success in the material world depends on many outside factors, and it is uncertain. But an adequate effort in spiritual life is always assured of success because it is ours. It depends almost entirely on us. But our whole problem is laziness. After a few minutes of prayer and meditation, we expect God to become gracious. So, effort is important. The struggle to go beyond the fantasy world that we have been building up for years. Most people are unwilling to abandon it. They are too lethargic to work against their own minds. The question is, are we ready to pay the price for spiritual freedom? We know the way, we know the methods and techniques, and the great ones are ready to help us with their guidance. But we are so stubborn that we never take the plunge. We keep postponing our efforts and we are content with deriving mere intellectual enjoyment from some fine ideas without bothering to live the life ourselves. So after several years, we find ourselves asking, what have I achieved? What have I got out of spiritual life? But no one who practices the discipline sincerely and methodically, no one who leads a pure life and prays to God intensely will be disappointed. So, we should rise to the challenge, make the best use of the time and resources that we have. The disciples of Sri Ramakrishna have said that one of the most effective ways of overcoming difficulties like this, mental barriers, is to come into contact with people who are themselves eagerly seeking God and catch some of their fire. Such holy company is sure to awaken conviction and faith in our hearts and inspire us into action. Then come the twin qualities of courage and determination. A person who wants to be spiritual has to be very courageous. Things are somewhat easy in the beginning of spiritual life when we have once settled down into a routine of spiritual practice. But in the later stages, it demands its full price. Nothing is given for free. It has all to be deserved. So we need to equip ourselves for the battles that are inside and outside. We have to fight every inch of the way if we want to reach the goal. We must meet adversity courageously and with determination. This struggle is very necessary. It is for our own good, and it is, I believe, itself a sign of God's grace. Swami Yatishwarananda ji used to say, God's grace comes in the form of self-effort. Through struggle, we become strong. After all, where do we find bravery without the necessity for struggle? How can we express courage without struggle? How can we become heroes if we have never entered the battlefield? Unless we have grappled with our minds, what can we know about its powers, let alone manifesting them? So, as spiritual aspirants, we should be willing to wage the inside warfare bravely and resolutely until we have transformed ourselves. Spiritualizing oneself is not an easy task. We don't become spiritual naturally. Never believe what you hear about this so-called natural or spontaneous spirituality. I think it's a myth. All great things have been achieved only by going against nature, external or internal. This is what Swami Vivekananda himself pointed out. Those who are spiritual now have already done their battle successfully. Our normal or accustomed nature is in constant conflict with our higher nature. And when we struggle, we create a friction between the ideal and the normal states. The effort of this struggle generates heat, and this heat, what is called tapas, this heat burns up much impurity. When we make every effort to transcend the lower state, that is the beginning of the higher mind. And through unremitting struggle, we eventually become established in a higher state of mind. So, mere courage doesn't count for much if our struggles are not also persistent and determined. A person who is fully determined to pursue spiritual life and has spirituality as their only goal is as good as they are already. Nothing can deter them. As Swami Ashokananda ji used to say, it's a very beautiful remark. Ashokananda ji says, you need very little to go ahead if you really want to go ahead. Then again, going from one minor success to another often makes a person weak. When failure suddenly comes, they collapse. So a true soldier is one who has done many battles, has been defeated many times. Out of defeat and discouragement comes another kind of courage which is very different from the shallow courage that is here today and gone tomorrow. So let us never mind failure. Failure, when it is followed by another sincere effort, always brings more determination and more perseverance. That is how failure becomes a stepping stone. We may fail, but if we try again, we can bring out the strength we need to succeed because we have it in us. If in defeat we don't become downhearted or quit, but remain steady like rocks, victory is sure to be ours. The very fact that we are determined and have the courage to struggle on, that itself will bring liberation in the end. Another obstacle is, now and then in our spiritual journey, we encounter dry spells. Some such spells may last for long periods when we seem to be going nowhere. It's very easy to lose heart during these dark periods. The mind quickly sinks into depression and refuses to come out of it. Despair and dejection become two luxuries, if I may call them so. Two luxuries, and the mind indulges in them. We must beware of them. We must hang on tenaciously even in these moments of weakness and continue with our practice. Because, let me repeat, no effort is wasted in spiritual life. Just as in climbing mountains, going down is also going forward, even so in spiritual life, a loss is a gain. A loss is a gain if only we hold on and do not give up. This we should not forget. Insecurity is a very opportune time for spiritual growth. We then search for something steady and try to find resources within ourselves. We may not see immediate results, but we are surely awakening the higher mind. Swami Vivekananda writes these encouraging lines in one of his beautiful poems. If the sun by the cloud is hidden a bit, if the welkin shows but gloom, still hold on yet a while, brave heart, the victory is sure to come. No winter was, but summer came behind. Each hollow crests the wave. They push each other in light and shade. Be steady then and brave. So when we have exhausted all the powers of our will, but still don't give up, something higher wakes up. More energy flows in. And this is the secret of all spiritual achievement. But side by side with determination and courage, we must also have patience and endurance. This is no less important. Determination without patience is destructive. Spiritual unfoldment is a long process and very difficult to achieve. Spiritual growth is extremely slow even when we struggle sincerely. But that doesn't matter when we realize the immensity of what we have undertaken. Just think of it. The finite is going to the infinite. Swami Ashokananda ji asks, the finite is going to the infinite. What more do you want? So great patience is necessary. As we pray and meditate, we must also live the life. Patience and endurance provide stability to long-term spiritual growth. We need not be overly worried by the sense of time. Impatience is a state of mind that is to be avoided in every phase of life, not only in spiritual life. What does impatience indicate, after all? We are not willing to take as much trouble as we should. That is what it shows. We want to get it over with quickly and get on to something else. This sort of impatience can do us a great deal of harm. We should never entertain the idea that we will practice for a time and then give up. Because anything of eternal value must be approached with an idea of timelessness. One must say, if it is for all time, then I am prepared to do it. Like the hereditary farmer Sri Ramakrishna spoke about. The Master says, a man whose father and grandfather have been farmers continues his farming even when he doesn't get any crop in a season of drought. New farmers give up, but the hereditary farmer has accepted farming as his means of livelihood. So, if we carry on patiently, prayerfully, without giving up hope, we will find that all the things that are against us now will soon become favorable. This we must always keep in mind. Tomorrow, our condition may change. One thing all the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna have said, though in several different ways, spiritual life has many phases and an endless variety of experiences. It is a life of adventure and heroism and beauty. And whoever wants these should follow it without looking back. If only we follow the path conscientiously, without wavering, there is great joy, peace, and bliss in store for us. That will be our reward. So, to sum it all up, our personal response, our individual response to the challenge of spiritual life. If we are strong, if we have faith, if we train methodically and work ceaselessly, with courage and determination, with patience and endurance, we will be safe. Not comfortable, but safe and secure. If not, our so-called spiritual adventure may well turn out to be a misadventure. So that we may not meet with that terrible fate, let us pray to the divine. Tejosi tejo mayi dhehi, viryamasi viryam mayi dhehi, balamasi balam mayi dhehi, ojosi ojo mayi dhehi, manyurasi manyum mayi dhehi, sahosi saho mayi dhehi. This is a prayer from the Shukla Yajurveda. It says, O Lord, Thou art infinite energy, do Thou fill me with energy. Thou art infinite vigor, do Thou endow me with vigor. Thou art infinite strength, do Thou bestow strength upon me. Thou art infinite power, do Thou grant power unto me. Thou art infinite courage, do Thou inspire me with courage. Thou art infinite fortitude, do Thou steel me with fortitude. Thank you. Now, let us spend a couple of minutes in silence. Then we will have another song by our Prakhyat, after which we can go downstairs to the basement for some refreshments. But before we do that, here's a short reminder. Next Sunday, revered Swami Brahmarupanandaji will be giving his regular monthly talk on the Ashtavakra Samhita. So please be sure to attend it. And that's it for now. Thank you.
तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। एक तुझको अपना पाया, एक तुझको अपना पाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। सबके मकान दिल का मकीन तू, सबके मकान दिल का मकीन तू, कौन सा दिल है जिसमें नहीं तू, कौन सा दिल है जिसमें नहीं तू। हर एक दिल में तू ही समाया, हर एक दिल में तू ही समाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। क्या मालायक क्या इंसान, क्या मालायक, क्या मालायक क्या इंसान, क्या हिंदू क्या मुसलमान, क्या हिंदू क्या मुसलमान, जैसे चाहा तूने बनाया, जैसे चाहा तूने बनाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। अर्श से लेकर फर्श ज़मीं तक, अर्श से लेकर फर्श ज़मीं तक, और ज़मीं से अर्श वरी तक, और ज़मीं से अर्श वरी तक, जहाँ देखा तू नजर नजर आया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, तुझसे हमने दिल को लगाया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। सोचा समझा देखा भाला, सोचा समझा देखा भाला, तेरे जैसा ढूंढ न पाया, तेरे जैसा ढूंढ न पाया। अब ये समझ में ज़ाफ़र के आया, अब ये समझ में ज़ाफ़र के आया, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है, जो कुछ है सो तू ही है। तुझको हम